Welcome to today's podcast, and we generally talk about property, but the byline of this podcast is property investment, success and money. And today we're going to talk about success and money with my good friend and co-author of our international best-selling book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. We're going to talk with Tom Corley, who's a CPA, but also an authority on millionaire habits and wealth accumulation. In fact, we're going to talk about a recent blog he wrote that he called Everything You Need to Know About Becoming a Multimillionaire. So if that interests you, I'm sure you're going to enjoy my chat with Tom. So welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, where we help investors gain clarity amongst the confusion of all the mixed messages. And it's not just property, but also financial management and smart money management. That's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Welcome, Tom. As I said in the introduction, today I'd like to have a chat about one of your recent blogs called Everything You Need to Know About Becoming a Multimillionaire. I enjoy your daily blogs, but that one really caught my attention.
Yeah, Michael, that was one of my favorite articles because I thought I nailed it in terms of consolidating so much information into a short piece that I thought it would be more valuable to people instead of them having to look at, 15 to 20 articles to, pull it all together that way. This is really probably about 8 articles in one.
Well, a lot of people who are listening to this and watching this have read our international best-selling book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, or have read your blogs on My Property Update or listened to our podcast before. But we've got lots of new listeners. So what has given you the right to be able to discuss these sort of topics, the rich habits?
Well, so the motivation behind me starting my 5-year Rich Habits study was I was born rich. My father's business went under. Then we were poor, and that carried over into my adult life. I learned a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And so at some point, when I was running my CPA firm, a business client came up and said, I need to meet with you. And he was going bankrupt, and he wanted to know what he was doing wrong and what my successful clients were doing. And so it really lit a fire under my butt because I felt so bad for this man who was crying in front of me. And I spent 5 years studying the daily habits of the rich people. And then I remember I told my wife, hey, I finished that all that research I was doing. I just finished it. It was like 2.5 years. And she said, well, that's great. You know what wealthy people do, but what do poor people do that's making them poor? And I was like, I went back to like the drawing board. So I studied both the rich and the poor because, Michael, you have to know, it's not enough just to know what to do. You also have to know what not to do.
Makes sense, definitely. So in your blog, you wrote that becoming rich is actually very, very hard, but you've also got to develop the rich habits and minimize the poor habits that we spoke about. But let's have a look at that first concept, that becoming wealthy is really, really hard. What do you mean by that?
Well, particularly for entrepreneurs and to some degree, big company climbers and virtuosos.
Well, sorry, maybe I should go back a step. You also mentioned there are 4 ways to become wealthy. Maybe let's outline those first, and then we'll dig into how they do things differently.
Yeah, so Michael, this is really important, and this is proprietary to my research. I think it may be, besides the rich habits and the poor habits, it may be the most important thing that you learn in life. There's a lot of people out there who listen to people like us, and they try to become an entrepreneur, let's say. I'm going to be an entrepreneur like Michael and Tom. And the problem is they don't have the personality to be an entrepreneur. There's 4 paths to wealth, Michael. There's the saver investor path, the big company climber path, the virtuoso path, and the dreamer entrepreneur path. You have to have a specific personality to pursue each one of those paths. If you, for example, have the personality of a saver investor, if you try to become an entrepreneur, you will fail 100%. You'll fail. And if you are an entrepreneur and you say, I want to be, save money, I want to be live frugally and all this stuff, you will fail because entrepreneurs have a high risk tolerance. They cannot stand the idea of, saving 20% of their income. They want to invest that money. They want to put it at risk. So these four paths are so profound because there's more. It says to everybody out there, anyone can become a millionaire. You just got to find the path that is best suited for your personality.
Okay, so back to what I asked a moment ago, Tom. You said that becoming wealthy is really, really hard. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think particularly for the entrepreneurs, it's very hard. Entrepreneurs put everything on the line. They probably, on average, work about 60 to 70 hours a week, especially in the early going of growing their business, trying to get it off the ground. So there's long hours. And what does that mean when you have these long hours and this becomes your primary focus in your life? It means something in your life has to be sacrificed. And typically that's your family and your friends. You don't spend as much time as you would want to with your family and friends. And so the entrepreneur path is the hardest path. The second hardest path is the big company climber path. That also requires sacrifice. You're traveling. Usually they travel a lot. Big company climbers, they're required to. I can tell you, my son travels every week, and he's not home 3 or 4 days a week. So he doesn't see his kids, doesn't see his wife 3 or 4 days a week. But he's making great money and he's being very successful. These are the sacrifices that you have to make if you want to build wealth. And it's hard emotionally. You and I, Michael, we're not spring chickens anymore. And so we kind of understand the emotional part of being entrepreneurs, don't we?
Definitely. So it's not as easy as it often is suggested on social media. Just follow me and I'll show you how to become rich quickly. In fact, becoming wealthy takes a long time, Tom. In property, my area, I've often suggested it takes 30 years. People don't like to hear that, but that's the truth.
Isn't that interesting that you said 30 years? Because the saver investors in my Rich Habits study, a lot of them invested, about 50% of them invested in real estate. And it took the saver investor an average of 32 years to accumulate $3.4 million, I believe. And isn't that interesting that you said 30 years and my study says 32 years?
Now, some people are entrepreneurs and can do it quicker, but it does take time and it also takes discipline, doesn't it? But we've spoken before and you've written before about the importance of luck. Becoming wealthy seems to require an element of luck too, doesn't it, Tom?
Yeah, such a good point. So this is where persistence becomes that rich habit of persistence becomes a real asset because Lady Luck visits the persistent. For people, I know because I've spoken at Jack Canfield's Breakthrough Success training, and I met a lot of people there. And this one woman, I remember, Michael, she kept emailing me and calling me. I don't know how she got my cell number. She got my cell number, and she was jumping like a frog from one lily pad to the next. And I told her, you're never going to be successful if you keep jumping from one thing to the other. You just have to focus on one thing, because if you stay on one lily pad for a long, long time, eventually Lady Luck will visit you and you'll get lucky. It's just that's how luck works. I call it opportunity luck, but yeah, you're right. You have to have luck to be successful, not as a saver investor and not so much as a virtuoso, but as a big company climber and as an entrepreneur. Luck is a prerequisite to success.
Okay, it also involves over time building good relationships, doesn't it? You can't do it on your own.
No, and boy, these rich relationships, there's a lot of subcategories of this. Mentors, which we've talked about on other podcasts. People who are influencers, I call them power relationships. These are people that can, with a text or an email or a phone call, they can transform you into a millionaire overnight just by getting you that big customer or client that you were trying to get. They know somebody there, or maybe they can help your kid get into that university that you wanted, that will open up an enormous opportunity for your child. These influencers, these power relationships, they're game changers. They're hard to come by, though. Very hard to come by.
Now, you've spoken about dream setting in previous chats and you've written about that. But I also know that becoming wealthy requires a plan. For our clients at Metropole, we put together a strategic property plan. We work out where they are now, where they want to be in the future, and then what they need to go to do to get to where they want to get to. I guess we help them plan to become the person they plan to become. I know that you recognise as a CPA, as a financial planner, the importance of having a clarity on where you're heading.
Yeah, you need to have a clear vision in every path of wealth, the four paths that we talked about. In every path, you need to have a clear vision of exactly who you want to be, say, 15 or 20 years down the road. The reason it's important is that acts as your GPS. And you're going to get hit with all things in life. You're going to get whacked from the left and you're going to get whacked from the right. It's going to take you
Yes.
off course, and it's going to derail you. You will get derailed every year 3 or 4 times. Having a clear vision of where you're going keeps you get knocked off, and then it helps get you back on the track, and now you're not derailed anymore. So it's so important to have this clear vision, this idea of where you're going to be 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
Now, Tom, becoming wealthy while you're married or have a long-term relationship, in my mind, requires you to have a spouse who shares your dreams, goals, values, habits. Unfortunately, we see so many people getting divorced, and I sometimes call that an asset reallocation program. Boy, you can lose a lot of money along the way if you don't have a supportive spouse.
Yeah, I call it financial suicide to my clients. I actually talked one woman out of divorcing her husband because she realized she wasn't going to be able to do the things that she wanted to do if they were divorced. So she said, I'm going to stick with him. Told this story at one of my speaking gigs about how in the early days of my book writing, it was a struggle. It took about 4 or 5 years for me to really start selling books. And I remember my wife, Denise, she said, stop wasting your time on the books. Focus on, the financial planning and the CPA business. You're never going to make any money. Authors don't get rich. And then about a year later, I sold about 50,000 books in a 1-month period, and I got a check for $140,000 from the publisher. And I showed it to Denise, and I said, do you still want me to stop pursuing this dream? She goes, no. She became my biggest cheerleader, Michael. And that's sometimes your spouse may not be in alignment with what you're doing, but this is where the little successes matter. When they start to see that it's not a waste of time, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, meaning money, they'll get on board real fast. So you have to stick it out. You have to fight through the relationship problems and try and get at least to a point of success where they can see and share your vision, because they realize there's going to be some opportunity here to make money. If unfortunately, too many people have spouses that say, I'm out, and they don't have the patience, a rich habit, patience. And, that's unfortunate, but you do need, when you have a spouse that's on the same page, Michael, boy, oh boy, you do. I know you do. It makes pulling that cart so much easier, doesn't it?
Well, having a written plan, actually working on it together, going to your financial planner, your property strategist, whatever, together actually makes that easier as well. Because very frequently I've seen people not on the same page, but having a plan that you've developed together makes it easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, just because you get their input in it, they feel like they're sharing the plan, the creation of the plan. Yeah, I agree.
Now, of course, being wealthy also requires you to be fit and with it all the time. So health is an important part of becoming wealthy. You've got to invest in your body.
I found this in my study. It knocked me off my chair almost, because I always thought of wealthy people as overweight, obese. That's what I thought. They were obese. They smoked cigars and they philandered. And that was my impression of wealthy people. And when I did my study, I realized, oh my God, these wealthy people are better than the average person. They're almost heroic in what they're doing, and they're generous and they're kind and they're hardworking. They had all of these great attributes. One of them was they had good health. They exercised on a regular basis. And many of them wanted to stay healthy because they believed that at the end of their careers was when they were going to make the most wealth. And I actually had one of the self-made millionaires in my study tell me that the last 3 years of his career, he made more money than he made in the first 30 years.
That's the power of compounding in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
it is.
talking about health, I guess there's another thing that I've learned that's important and I emphasize, and that's having enough sleep at night. I know in the early days I used to cut things short. There are some people who talk about the 5 a.m. club, getting up an
Yeah.
hour earlier than everyone else and doing an hour's more work. I'm not sure that's the right way.
Well, no, and by the way, that 5 a.m. club, that was stolen from me. I did a speaking gig in Canada with Robin Sharma, and I talked a lot about the 5 a.m. club, and he ended up about 3 years later writing a book called The 5 a.m. Club. Now, what's important is not what time you wake up in the morning. What's important is how much it's getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, because that's what most people need. In 7 to 8 hours, you get a minimum of 4 sleep cycles. Every sleep cycle is 90 minutes. You need a minimum of 4 of them. 5 is ideal. And the sleep cycle is so important because part of the sleep cycle is when your brain cells shrink, the lymphatic fluid flows in and it cleans out all of the brain. If you don't get enough sleep, you're not getting that janitorial maintenance of the brain that you need in order to think clearly.
Now, also, we've spoken in the past about the importance of a positive outlook. I haven't come across a rich pessimist. Unfortunately, there's so much negative media at the moment, all the world geopolitical problems. It's easy to find negativity if you want to because the media loves feeding us that. Wealthy people are optimistic. They're positive, aren't they, Tom?
Yeah, and not only that, they typically surround themselves with other optimistic people.
Yes.
I have most of my clients are that way because I've pared down the negative clients. I've gotten rid of them over the years, but I still have one that I hang on to because I loved her mother. And when she walks into the office, you can cut the negativity with a knife. It's so thick, and I have to prepare myself for it because it does affect me. It affects my energy levels, and it makes me tired when I'm done with her. Whereas I had people in this morning, they're so optimistic and upbeat. I was bouncing off the walls when they were done. So that's the difference. Optimism increases your energy levels, and pessimism reduces your energy levels. Optimism opens your eyes to opportunities, allows you to see things that you would never see with a negative mindset. And it's intentional. That's the way the brain works. When you're negative, it focuses. It limits your focus like a tunnel. And when you're optimistic, it expands your mindset and opens you up, and you start to see things you never saw before.
Well, as we're working through this list of everything you need to know about becoming a multimillionaire or rich, wealthy, whatever you like, you always talk about the importance of finding mentors, Tom. How does one go about finding the right mentor? What qualities do you look for in that relationship?
Yeah, I'm just going to be honest with everybody up front. There are only, of all of the self-made millionaires in my study, only 19% found mentors, success mentors. But the interesting thing is that 19% said that their mentors were 100% responsible for their wealth. So what I found that they did, the 19%, is they joined nonprofits. They joined industry trade groups. They did things like Wealth Retreat to meet other people who had, same vision, same ideals that they were pursuing, the dreams and the goals. You have to find those people in the areas where they are, and they're in nonprofits, they're in trade groups, they're in a Wealth Retreat, they're in Jack Canfield's Breakthrough Success, that Tony Robbins has these events that he puts on. That's where they are, and that's where you're going to find them, and you'll find some mentors there. I know after the Breakthrough Success, I helped maybe 2 or 3 people for about a year. You can also create these mastermind groups and invite people who have expertise that you lack to, maybe spend an hour a month. I've done that and it works. So there are different ways to find your mentors.
Well, I'm still in 2 mastermind groups. The question, of course, is, are the people that are mentoring you the right people? Have they achieved what you want to achieve? And that's very, very important. You need doers, not theorists. Now, Tom, I'm going to leave a link to your original article in the show notes so people know about that, because there's much more detail in that where you've written about, in your words, everything you need to know about becoming a multimillionaire. And I'll leave a link to your daily blog in the show notes as well, so people can get this information from you, as I enjoy reading every day, which is about the psychology and the motivation of becoming wealthy. Of course, we've written an international best-selling book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. I'll leave another link to that too. Gee, lots of links. But the concept really is that has helped so many people move to the next level. So, and in multiple countries around the world, we get great feedback about that book, don't we?
Yeah, I told you off the podcast before we started how I've been getting these testimonials and endorsements. I call them from people who have read our books, who have followed us on this podcast, the Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast. And, they say, thank you. You've changed my life. You helped me get on track. I don't know what I would do without your research and you and Michael. I appreciate it so much. I get them all the time, and it makes you feel good about what you're
Does.
doing. It's not always about
Fantastic.
money. It's not always about
Well,
money.
I look forward to catching up with you again real soon to talk a bit more about the Rich Habits. Thanks for your time, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's always great talking to you.
Now, it's been a while since I've had Tom on the Michael Yardney podcast. I always have fun chatting with him, and we talk a lot in between. He's the co-author of Rich Habits, Poor Habits, and we both recognise that it takes a lot more than just property and data and research to become wealthy and maintain wealth in property. So I hope you got some benefit from the chat with him. And we spoke a little bit about Wealth Retreat. Tom has come to Wealth Retreat many years in a row. This year, he's actually got a family wedding, so he's not attending Wealth Retreat, but has done 2 special presentations on video that we're going to be gifting all the people who are coming to Wealth Retreat. Now, you've probably heard me talk about it. You've got all my emails about it. You've probably, or some people are thinking, I don't need to go to Wealth Retreat. I can figure this out myself and save 5 days of my time and lots of money. So let me ask you to consider. Imagine a place where for 5 transformative days, you aren't just absorbing information, but you're living an experience that enriches your understanding of wealth creation. Because it's more than just money and property that we're talking about. We're talking about wealth holistically at Wealth Retreat 2025. It's not just about what you learn, but it's who you become in the process. Now, that's not a play on words. I've seen significant transformations in the guests who join us year after year since 2006. Maybe that's why many of them come back for a second, third, and fourth time. So it's much more than just information. I know you've heard that knowledge is power, but in the world of wealth creation, context and connections are just as important. Sure, you can learn from books and podcasts and online resources, but they can only take you so far, and they lack the immediacy and personal engagement that comes from being surrounded by experts and like-minded peers. So when you join us at Wealth Retreat, you're going to get networking opportunities. You're going to work on yourself, for yourself, and it's going to be an immersive learning experience with some exclusive insights, but tailored strategies, because you're going to have one-on-one sessions, and at the end, everyone has a one-on-one implementation session with me. So go to wealthretreat.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, wealthretreat.com.au, because after you attend, you're going to go out with firm plans. You're going to come in with ideas, but firm plans for the next 5 years of your life, because that's the theme of Wealth Retreat. Where am I going to be in May 2030, 5 years' time? I look forward to helping you transform your approach to wealth. I'll see you at Wealth Retreat.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
Let me start by telling you that my mindset message today is going to offend some people, particularly the younger ones, but please allow me to tell you that I think the world doesn't owe you anything. As I get older, and I hope a little bit wiser, I think there's a real problem going on in the world today. I feel so many people walk around with a general sense of entitlement. And as I see it, it's damaging. Now, the truth might hurt, but the world doesn't owe you anything. Now, I know that may sound harsh, but accepting the truth is essential in maximising your personal development and your financial situation. You see, the sooner you take responsibility for yourself and stop relying on others, like the government or your employer, to take care of you, the sooner you take control of your own financial future. Now, depending on your background and perspective, this concept may sound a little scary. I'll tell you, it's nowhere near as scary as hoping your employer is going to show you loyalty when the market changes, or that you're going to be paid what you're worth when the market does well. That's a mirage. It's not at all secure. One of the most powerful things that will happen when you accept that no one's going to take care of you financially is that you're going to become more motivated to do something. You're going to begin looking closer at your financial situation. You're going to look at your budget, how much you earn, how much you spend, how much you pay in taxes, what your expenses are. You start taking responsibility. So I hope once you take responsibility, you're going to think in a different way. So why are we getting this sense of entitlement? I think this is partly because of, now again, I'm going to offend somebody, the cushy way the way many children are raised over the past couple of decades. When you consider that we live in what has really been ranked as the wealthiest country in the world, a while ago I was surprised that about 50% of our nation receives a government benefit of some sort. Now, I'm all for helping those in genuine need. Sorry, I said not, but I didn't mean that. I'm not against that is what I wanted to say. I'm definitely for helping people in genuine need. In fact, I've always supported a range of charities for the needy. But it seems that today there are more people not doing their share, waiting for those that do their share to provide for them. In essence, they feel the world owes them something. In fact, many people operate on the assumption the world owes them a hot meal, a bed to sleep in, shoes, and anything else they simply want just because we exist. In fact, I know that at the moment there's some people who just don't want to work, and if they do work, they don't want to work too hard, or they don't want to work in jobs that they see beneath them or things that are not of their main interest. So I believe that we've got to create confidence in our children. At the moment, though, children aren't allowed to fail. Look, call me old-fashioned, but I see children getting trophies just for showing up, lest we hurt somebody's feelings by admitting that one child is better than the other. We can no longer separate the intelligent from the less intelligent, and it's not a judgment of the quality of the people, but we're forced to make everybody fit into the same mould of life. See, the world's got a bullying problem that can't be solved in the playground brawls anymore. In many ways, many people today are living their lives as victims. They're giving up their right to choose, to succeed and create their own destiny by sitting back and waiting for the scrappy handouts that are left behind. And then, with audacity, these same people feel they've got a right to complain about what they're given. The problem of entitlement is not going to go anytime soon. The truth is people need to realise that it is we who owe the world. We owe the world our talents, our skills. We owe the world our ability to take care of our planet. We owe the world our efforts to make the planet a happier, safer place. And I believe we owe the world the ability to help those who genuinely are in need. There'll always be disenfranchised people. But until each and every person can get together and realise that within each of us, big and small, black and white, male and female, rich or poor, lies a responsibility to the world, in my mind, things are only going to get worse. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney Podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. Oh, and I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?